Okay, hello again to everybody who's joined us today. My name's Thom Kiddle. I'm Director of Nile and co-lead on our English medium instruction in higher education project here, joined by my colleague at Nile and co-lead Jason Skeet, and also by Olga Kim from British Council Uzbekistan, who've mediated, constructed and supported in the delivery of the project. The session is being recorded, and I'd like to give a warm welcome to all of you who are attending, and also to invite Olga to say a few words from the British Council. Olga, can you? Yeah, hi.
Thank you, Thom. Good day and good morning, Thom and Jason. Good day to all webinar participants. Thank you for joining us. I'm delighted to start today's webinar, which is the first in the series of webinars, as Thom said. We're going to start today and we'll continue in March, and hope you will find it not only very interesting, but also very useful, as we know how important the role of foreign languages is, and English in particular for higher education in Uzbekistan today. So the British Council and the Ministry of Higher and Secondary Specialized Education work in partnership to develop capacity and expertise to internationalize higher education and to address quality and relevance of education for national development agendas. To respond to national large-scale higher education reforms, the capacity development and internationalization objectives, in 2019, in partnership with the Ministry of Higher and Secondary Specialized Education and Norwich Institute for Language Education, we launched a new project, English as Medium of Instruction, EMI, in higher education. And today we are happy to tell you more about the project, its aims and objectives, as well as the outcomes that the project has achieved so far. We asked to share this with all of you, our project partners from Norwich Institute for Language Education, two leading experts in ELT. Please meet Thom Kiddle, the Director of Norwich Institute for Language Education, and Dr. Jason Skeet, who is coordinating all academic aspects of the Nile MA in Professional Development for Language Education, and who is a Nile project coordinator for the EMI in Uzbekistan. Before I give the floor to Thom, I would ask you to be an active listeners and keep all your questions for the end of the presentation. Now, please, over to Thom and Jason.
Thank you very much indeed, Olga. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Olga's given a good overview of what we're going to look at in today's first webinar, and really focus in on the project so far in the developments and outcomes since 2019. I know many of you will have been involved in some form in the project, and others will be interested to hear what we've done so far and to think about your own potential future involvement in English medium instruction in the higher education setting. A little bit about Nile. We've been working with colleagues in Uzbekistan for many years now. It's been a major focus of different projects across the education system, and we're delighted to have been part of this project as well. We've worked with teachers, teacher trainers, education specialists, professionals in education for 25 years, and in the last 7 years have taken a lot of that learning into our online space, which is how, because of the situation in the last 12 months, much of the project has been delivered. However, we were able to come to work with project participants in Tashkent earlier in the project, and we'll touch on that as well. Myself, I'm director of Nile and coordinator of many projects around the world. I've been to Uzbekistan several times and always had a very warm welcome and enjoyed very much working with education professionals, motivated, enthusiastic, experienced and highly professional teachers, lecturers, trainers, and students there. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm also joined by the project academic lead, Jason.
Hello everyone, so my name's Jason Skeet. As Olga mentioned, I'm the program leader for Nile's MA in Professional Development Language Education. I'm also a teacher trainer, and the areas that I focus on in terms of training teachers are CLIL, Content and Language Integrated Learning, EMI of course, formative assessment, and also materials development. And so in terms of this project that we're going to be talking about, I've been involved with coordinating the project, but also delivering some of the training as well.
Thank you, Jason. So in today, we want to talk a little bit about what EMI means in the conceptualization in the broader sense, and particularly for this project, and the focus in on the EMI teacher in the classroom, whether that's virtual, face-to-face, or blended, and what the challenges are for delivering English medium instruction to learners with varying levels of English language competence and varying needs in terms of their faculty and subject areas. We want to tell you about the project and the participants who were involved in this, and then talk about how we approach the professional development side of this project, aiming to empower those teachers both on the EMI faculty content side and their colleagues in the English for Specific Purposes side to work together to develop and improve and maintain the quality of English medium instruction in the classroom and in the institutions as a whole. And we'll tell you a little bit about the outcomes so far, what we've done in terms of development with those teachers, and also what's come out in terms of products that are part of the project and are available for use in much wider circumstances beyond the project remit. So let's talk a little bit about English medium instruction, and we've used this quote from Julie Dearden here to really just focus in on what we're talking about here is when we use English language to teach academic subjects in contexts where the majority of the student body, the population in that system, don't have English as a first language, and so are engaging with that subject faculty specific content through the medium of English. You may be familiar with and have seen reference to the term EME as well, English Medium Education. For us in this project, we prefer the focus on EMI because we understand education to be broader and a much wider remit across institutions, and many of the aspects of pastoral care and administration and other aspects of university, higher education life may not be English medium oriented or English medium focused, but the classroom focus and the learning focus and the teaching focus is English medium in this project, and that's why we're continuing with the term English medium instruction rather than English medium education. We really need to conceptualize where English medium instruction sits in this broader framework of education delivered for and through English learning. And we see this as a cline, where on the left we have that area of courses, area of learning, where term in ESP, English for Specific Purposes, English for Academic Purposes, English for Specific and Academic Purposes, where the teacher's role in the classroom is really focusing on the language development, the language capacity, the proficiency, and the knowledge of English generally and specifically, and the teachers working on that English language development. In the middle of the cline there are various approaches to CLIL, Content and Language Integrated Learning, where the teacher has a dual responsibility, a dual role, both to develop content knowledge, subject competence, but also to develop the student's English language capacity. And over on the right-hand side of the cline, English medium instruction, we're really talking about a situation in which the teacher in the classroom's main and almost exclusive role will be the development of the content areas, the faculty specific content, the engineering or the finance or law or history, is the main responsibility of the tutor, and they don't have an explicit responsibility for English language development. However, the implications for English language support and scaffolding and the way they approach their subject is what this project is all about. So we're really focusing on the right-hand end of that climb, working with teachers who are subject experts, who are faculty experts, to support the learning and the teaching through English. I'd like to invite Jason now to focus in a little bit on the pedagogical side of this.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Tom. So another aspect of the way that we have conceptualized the project is that we're using the term EMI teacher. Even though this is a higher education context, and it might be more normal to use the term lecturer, for example, but we've chosen to use the term teacher. And really that's because of the focus on the pedagogical aspects of delivering a subject through English. There are important implications for how a lecturer does this. And I want to say a little bit more about that in a moment. Can we go to the next screen, Tom? These then are the main challenges for EMI teachers. The first challenge, of course, is their English language level and their own proficiency. A second challenge here is the pedagogical challenge. So this links back to what I said about the reason why we're using this term EMI teacher. And we're going to pick up on some of these points as well later when we look at the aspects of the training that's taken place on the project. There are implications for how EMI teachers plan and deliver their lectures, their seminars, their practical sessions. There's a couple of examples there, but there's a lot more that we need to consider. But for example, an EMI teacher is going to need to think about how to guide their students' understanding of the content of their lecture, for example. Using visuals to support their explanations is one important technique, if you like. Another aspect is the opportunities that they give to their own students to interact with each other and with the teacher. So those are just two aspects, pedagogical aspects, that have been looked at as part of the training that we've done on this project, but there are many other pedagogical aspects to consider as well. A third challenge, though, is collaboration that needs to take place between the EMI subject teacher and then the ESP or EAP, so that's English for specific purposes, English for academic purposes, the language teachers. This is an important aspect, we feel, of how to look at the implementation of EMI. These collaborations between the language teacher and the subject teacher are an important aspect of effective implementation. So this is also a challenge. And of course, these challenges that you're looking at here, these are institutional challenges as well as individual challenges. Institutions need to think about these challenges as well and address these challenges. Okay, next slide, please, Tom. These are the aims that have been formulated by the British Council for the project. So if I just look through these, to build and develop capacity for delivering EMI programs in higher education institutions in Uzbekistan, to contribute to longer term national EMI policies and strategy development, and to encourage internal support systems between the ESP or EAP teachers and then the EMI professionals. So that picks up on what I've just talked about in terms of collaboration. These are the main aims for the project. And we're going to try and sort of delve into how we've addressed these aims. So if we look at the next screen, Tom, to achieve the aims, the project has these 5 main strands running throughout. we're also going to talk about how the project, as well as having these strands, how the project has been planned with different phases. But these strands, they go throughout all the phases of the project. So the first strand there is supporting project participants' professional development, with training focusing on specific aspects of EMI pedagogy. I just gave 2 examples previously of those aspects. A second strand, developing tools and resources and materials to support teachers' professional development. We are going to explain some specific examples of these tools and resources. Identifying and sharing best practice, monitoring and evaluating the impact of the project. These things have gone together, and we're going to talk about how we've been collecting examples of best practice from the project participants, but also using that as a way of monitoring and evaluating the impact of the project. We're going to talk a lot, in fact, about the importance of monitoring and evaluation. We have also a 4th strand. We've been collecting and analysing baseline data about EMI teachers' language proficiency, their pedagogical competencies, and their own students' language proficiency. The idea of baseline data, this is information that we collect at the beginning of the project, and we can then use that data later on as a way of measuring what sort of impact the project has been having. So that's the idea of baseline data. We're going to come back to that point as well when we talk more about monitoring and evaluation. And then a 5th final strand is developing and producing resources to support EMI programs. And we're going to look at some examples of these resources. We're going to talk about a curriculum syllabus template that we've developed, and we're going to talk about a teaching standards framework that we've developed as well as part of the project. Next screen. These are the participating institutions. There's 16. I'm not going to read all of these names out, so I'll just give you a moment to have a look there at those 16 institutions. You can see that it covers a range of different disciplines, different subject areas. And if we go to the next slide, you can see a picture there of the project participant. This was from the first training that took place in October of 2019, I think that's right. So there's over 70 EMI teachers, and also there's some EAP, ESP teachers among that group as well. The way then we've organised the project participants, each institution, each of those 16 institutions has a team of teachers that are involved in the project. And that team is composed of EMI subject teachers and some language teachers, ESP or EAP language teachers. The team also has a coordinator. Most of those coordinators have been language teachers, but not all of them. There's some institutions where the coordinator is a subject teacher. And that coordinator, their job has been to promote and support EMI developments within the institution. So that could involve, for example, team meetings amongst the team based at the institution, sharing and also organising the sharing of best practice within the team to also then get that out to the other participating institutions, where we'll explain later how that's taken place. And thinking about supporting other kinds of EMI professional development initiatives within the institution. One aspect there might be the idea of cascading the training that's taken place through the project, then cascading that training further within the institution. And we've tried to support and facilitate that by, for example, making all the materials that have been used for the training that's taken place, making that available so people can use it to do further training within their own institutions. Okay, next, yeah. I mentioned earlier that the project has been broken down into distinct phases. We're now coming towards the end of phase 3. This has actually been a really important aspect of how the project has been planned. I'm going to come back to this point as well in terms of the idea of a responsive approach to the training that's taken place. Because by having these phases, we've been able to review at the end of a phase how well things have gone, and then plan the next phase based on the monitoring and the evaluation that's taken place. So we've been able to respond to the needs that we've identified. But I do want to come back to that point. Let's just go through these phases very quickly, so you've got an idea of, if we go back to that first phase, Tom, so I just say a bit more about that. The project officially started in August 2019. It started with Thom and colleagues visiting Uzbekistan, meeting the stakeholders, meeting project participants, the teachers, observing some lessons, and that all fed into a pre-training needs analysis. We also started to collect baseline data, I'll say more about that. And then we did the first lot of training, and you just saw the photograph of the participants from that first training. Then there was some planning for the next phase. So if we go into phase 2, that kicked off in January of last year. We put together a project resource center. This was on Moodle, and this was a resource that allowed project participants to access resources that we were creating, such as the training materials, but also for them to share evidence of good practice. That included lesson recordings, and that's also something that I might talk about again later. We did some reporting in this second phase on the baseline surveys that we'd been carrying out, including about language, teachers' language proficiency. We also did some reporting on the way in which institutions are using placement testing or entry requirement testing on their own students' language proficiency. We did some EMI materials development training, which had responded to the need that we identified in phase 1, a need for materials development training. We did some training with mentors to help them support their colleagues in their institutions. And then we had an online EMI development course for all the project participants, which was focusing on 10 EMI competencies, which we had identified in phase 1. I'm going to talk about those competencies later, but these are specific competency areas focusing on the planning and delivering of EMI, but I will give you more detail about that. And then in phase 3, if we look at the phase that we're now coming towards the end of, we've done some more reporting on the impact of what's taken place in phases 1 and 2. We've been gathering evidence of EMI teaching practice, good EMI teaching practice. We've been analysing all the lesson recordings that project participants have created. We've also done some interviews with teachers. We've conducted more online surveys. So we're getting a really, really good resource together as well that could be shared beyond the 16 institutions, a resource that shows what EMI teaching practice looks like. We've produced this framework of teaching standards, which has been a really interesting aspect of the project to work on, because that framework involved the teachers themselves thinking about their teaching practice and describing specific aspects of their teaching practice. Normally, these frameworks of teaching standards are not actually produced by the teachers themselves. So that's quite a unique aspect of the project, that we've managed to create this framework from the ground up, if you like. And I think that's an important aspect of the underlying sort of ethos behind what we're doing, which I want to say more about in a moment. We've developed a curriculum syllabus template to help with planning in EMI program, and we've done more training on assessment in EMI and using a flipped learning approach for EMI. Again, this training has responded to a need that has been identified based on, getting feedback from the project. Okay, next screen, please, Tom. So I've been talking a little bit about monitoring and evaluation and needs analysis. I want to just say a little bit more about these concepts because there are some important underlying beliefs that we have about professional development that have fed into what we've been doing. And it's really important to point these ideas out. There are 4 things here that I'm just going to briefly talk about. The idea of needs analysis, the idea of a responsive approach. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about monitoring and evaluation very briefly, and then the idea of having tangible outcomes. So first of all, then, the training that we've delivered on this project has always been based on the idea of a needs analysis. So we've tried to identify what the specific needs are of the teachers that we're working with. And when you're doing a needs analysis, you need to do it in a way where you're collecting information in a variety of ways. So you can see on the screen there that we've used many methods. We've collected information from observation. We've had focus group interviews. We've had one-to-one interviews as well. We've asked participants to record lessons. We've had surveys and questionnaires. So all this information collected formally and also informally. All this information provides us with a very detailed picture of the sort of needs that project participants have in terms of their professional development. And the training is then based on that needs analysis. Of course, it's one thing to collect all this information, but then you've got to do something with it. And so that's what I mean about this second underlying concept that feeds into what we're doing, and that's to be responsive so that the planning and the delivery of the training and then other aspects of the project as well is an attempt to respond to the needs that we've identified. And that responsive approach is ongoing. And this is where having these phases is so useful, because we can complete one phase, collect information about needs, and then try and plan the next phase so that we can respond to those needs. If we go to the next screen, a third important aspect to the underlying approach for the project is the ongoing monitoring and evaluation, because as well as identifying the needs and responding to those needs, you've got to also find out what sort of impact the project is having. So to do that, you've got to monitor and evaluate the impact of the training and the other strands of the project. And you've got to do this, all the time. It doesn't just happen at one moment. You have to do it at lots of different moments. And again, using lots of different methods. We've been asking participants to keep project diaries on the project resource center. We've asked them to contribute lesson recordings. We've been asking them to complete reflective logs. We've also been conducting surveys and interviews. So all these different methods are used to monitor and evaluate the project. And finally, then, the fourth important underlying approach, a concept that's feeding into what we're doing, is the idea that we need to have tangible products that come out of this project. We're going to look at 2 in a moment. We're going to explain a little bit more about the curriculum syllabus template that's being produced to support the planning of EMI programs. And also we'll say a little bit more about this teaching standards framework. But these are tangible products that we can now use, hopefully, beyond the 16 institutions as well. These are products that can help other institutions as well to implement EMI. Right, so Tom, next screen, please. Let's look then, I've just talked about tangible products. Let's look at the outcomes from the project to date. And there's 6 outcomes that we're going to talk about. They reflect those strands that I mentioned right at the beginning. A first main outcome has been the teacher training that's taken place. And of course, the idea there is to support the project participants' professional development. We've had several training courses take place now. There was the introductory training in October. You saw the picture of all the participants that were there in October. We've had training focusing on materials development. We've had training for the coordinators of the teams in each institution. That training for the coordinators also focused on the reflective practice and how the coordinators might support their colleagues developing in terms of reflective practice, reflecting on their practice and identifying specific actions for improving practice. We've had this online development course focusing on these 10 EMI competencies, which I'll come back to in a moment. We've had an assessment in EMI training course and a flipped learning for EMI training course, which is, they're halfway through that course actually, so that's still taking place. So that was outcome 1. Outcome 2, if we go to the, there's a nice picture there of some training taking place. I forgot about that picture. And then on the right of the slide, can we just go back? Sorry, Tom, I'd forgotten about this slide. We've got some pictures of posters that were produced in the first training in October, where groups were asked to think about their vision for EMI. And the bottom poster there is a list of EMI techniques. So the group that produced that poster were thinking about pedagogical aspects of their work as EMI teachers. Okay, so outcome 2 has been the development of this project resource centre. So this is an online resource where we've been collecting various tools, resources and materials. There's an indication there of some of the resources that are available on this resource centre. There's a lesson observation template, a lesson planning tool, self-assessment tool, all the materials from the training courses, and those can be used to cascade the training. We've been curating and sharing best practice. So we've been asking participants to keep a diary of practice. So it might be specific things that a teacher has done in a lesson that they want to record in some way and share with others. We've also got the lesson video recordings that have been uploaded to the resource centre. That's been a great way of sharing good practice. We've also got a section on the resource centre for further reading. So people, if they want to do further reading about EMI, they can look at the resources there. So that was outcome 2. That's a picture of the resource centre on what is now the old Nile platform using Moodle. This is the new resource centre on the new platform. So this is how it now looks. You can see that a participant can access various resources there. A third main outcome then have been the monitoring and evaluation reports that we've done throughout the 3 phases now. And this has involved collecting and sharing best practice, collecting evidence of the impact of the activities from phases of the project, the impact that that's been having. We've used various methods for this monitoring and evaluation. Some of these I've now mentioned: project diaries, the lesson recordings, asking participants to keep reflective logs, various surveys, interviews, focus group interviews, as well as individual interviews with project participants. This, what you're seeing now on the screen, are notes from some interviews that took place, I think, back in November. So these were interviews that we were doing with project participants to explore and gather evidence about the impact that the project has been having on their own teaching practice. And here's an example of some data that we've collected from a survey. You can see some very positive data there. So this was, I believe this would have been an end of course survey. So like I said earlier, the monitoring and evaluation has been ongoing throughout the project. So I'm handing over to you now.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, so Jason's introduced the first 3 project outcomes. As he mentioned in his introduction, there's also a really systematic requirement for, if you're going to report on a project success and you want to measure the impact of the implementation of the ideas, to make sure that you've got information at the outset of a project talking about the various aspects which are covered within EMI within a classroom, but also within an institution. So it was crucial for us to conduct some of these baseline surveys, to look at what we mean when we talk about teachers' own language proficiency in the classroom, teachers' perception of their own pedagogical strengths and areas for development in terms of delivering through English in their content subject area, and also, and crucially, the aspect of the students' language proficiency, the range of levels of English that you'll find within a fairly heterogeneous populations of students on an EMI program. So what is it that we need to know about these things? Well, first of all, we wanted to do a set of baseline data of what universities are expecting students to come in with, what pre-course requirements there are in terms of language proficiency when you're admitting students onto English medium instruction programs. So what are the faculties saying that are prerequisites for joining a course that's going to be delivered wholly or partly in English? Then we did a separate project using the British Council's aptis test to look at what are the language proficiency levels of the teachers involved in EMI, and profiling those teachers and looking at the range and ways of supporting those teachers, and quite interesting data coming out because the aptis test is able to zero in on different aspects of language proficiency, the spoken dimension, the written dimension, the reading and the listening side. So bringing all that data in to profile the kinds of teacher who are delivering EMI in the classroom in Uzbekistan at the moment. And then also the self-assessment side of how teachers feel at the start of a project like this. How do they feel about their capacity for delivering through English? How do they feel about the aspects of pedagogy that they're strongest on? Which aspects do they feel they need to develop further? Which aspects do they feel are most important for putting them into the classroom with confidence and competence to deliver a program in English, when for many of these it's a second or third or even fourth language that they're working with. So those baseline surveys gave us a lot of information, really focusing in on, as you see in the example here, what do we need to do when we're talking about professional development? How do I see my competencies pre-class planning, during class delivery, post-class assessment, and that cycle of pedagogy within a classroom when we're delivering through English. So quite detailed products that have come out of this in terms of the survey, but also very important baseline data to say this is the picture at the beginning of the project. The fifth outcome, which takes our project onto the more institutional level and certainly at the department level, is to think about, well, when you're setting up a course, when you're putting a course for approval, perhaps with your university or institute's board of governance, what do you need to think about when you're taking your syllabus content, which perhaps traditionally was delivered through Uzbek or through Russian, and you're doing that with an English medium instruction approach? What is it that you need to be focusing on in terms of ensuring that your syllabus plan covers that English medium support, resources, assessment, class time in English, tasks in English? What is it that you need to focus on if you're going to support that English language development and use through receptive understanding of the language, but also productive use in interactive workshops, lectures, practical activities, all of these aspects of education which happen in your institutions and your teaching days. And we've piloted this template with a number of institutions now, and there'll be refinements there, but we think it fits very well within the project to say, okay, an approach to English medium instruction focuses on what happens in the classroom, but it's also very much supported by the department and by the institution as a whole in terms of making sure that the approach is clear to all, and that it's not ad hoc or based on just a teacher's own intuition, but that there's that recognition of the importance of planning your EMI delivery across your syllabus program and having a template of reference that you can go back to and say, this is how we're assessing the EMI component, this is how we're supporting the English medium instruction with the resources, with the lessons, with the specific language focuses within a course. So the fifth outcome there, tools for institutions to take and use to plan ahead for new programs or existing programs which are following an English medium instruction approach. So that's the fifth outcome. Our sixth outcome was or is the teaching standards framework that Jason's referenced here, and really kind of trying to identify what do we feel as a project team. And as Jason said, this is not top down, our impressions from Nile of what's important. This is very much built in a collaborative, co-constructed approach by the participating institutions and their representatives in the project. So what is it about English medium instruction that implicates standards and approaches and pedagogical competencies that we need to be aware of, that we can look across profiling our teams delivering EMI, looking at what it means to have successful teaching in a classroom, effective outcomes for the learners, who obviously are the end beneficiaries of such a project. So building a standards framework which simultaneously is grounded in reality, is formed by the teacher's needs and awareness of students' needs, but then is reviewed by experts and specialists in English medium instruction globally, but also representation from the universities as part of the project and the Ministry of Specialised State and Higher Education. So we can really get this collaborative approach to something that is grounded in fact and reality. And that's obviously an iterative process. So the framework itself has gone through a number of reviews. And then the next stage of that is to present this back to the project and say, this is what the project working groups have developed in terms of the standards framework. How do we share this information? How do we explain a conceptualization of how this framework could be used in teacher development, in institutional support, in bringing the English for specific purposes teachers into interaction with their colleagues who are delivering the faculty disciplines through English. And so a real holistic approach to establishing teaching standards that can be transferable and generalizable across faculty areas and across institutions. So webinars to introduce the concept of teaching standards, webinars to set expectations of what it can be used for and what it can't be used for, and then zeroing in on actually what do we mean when we're talking about standards in different areas. And the 10 categories that we collaboratively came to really cover a broad range of what happens in a teacher's professional life. This planning for the EMI instruction, once we get into the classroom, how do we bring in students' existing knowledge, both linguistic knowledge and content knowledge and procedural knowledge? How do we use the facilities of multimedia presentation through visuals, through image, through video, through audio, through speech, through students' output? How do we guide all of the understanding of this in a second, third, fourth language for the students? How can we encourage teachers to focus on their own use of language? In some conceptualizations, actually, a very high level of proficiency of the teacher is not the easy answer to this, because teachers have to know how to grade their language, how to moderate their language to the level of the students and the level of the input to make it accessible to all the students in the class. How do we support the students to be active participants? How do we encourage the students to use their English in this subject area when they're participating in the class, when they're writing assignments, when they're responding to tasks set by the teacher, both spoken and written. How do we empower teachers to be responsible for their own materials development, the tools they're using in the classroom, whether that's handouts, whether that's adapting resources that are published, whether that's developing presentations? How does a teacher understand the scaffolding and support needed to develop English medium materials in that subject area? How do we build in assessment that goes continuously throughout a program so that the model of assessment is not a final summative exam at the end of the course, but it's built into a course, and that the feedback is formative and leads to development and feed forward, if you like. And then on the kind of the slightly broader picture, how do we look at standards within how you work within an institution with your colleagues? How do you support your colleagues as a faculty, as an institution, bringing in the support from your English specific purpose colleagues, bringing in the support from other colleagues within your faculty area? And then how do you take the next steps yourself? When you have a picture of where you need to go and what you'd like to develop in, what resources are there, and how are you best going to take advantage of those? So that EMI teaching standards framework is one of the most important outputs of the project as a whole, because it really allows us to say, this is what we mean by quality, effective English medium instruction within programs, within institutions, and what happens within a classroom. So that's been a whistle-stop tour of 3 phases of a project over 5 strands across now into its second year, sorry, into its third year. And I hope you've found some of that interesting, food for thought, confirmatory for those of you who've been on the project, exciting for those of you who might be embarking on this journey in coming years, or who want to systematize the approach to English medium instruction within your institutions. But it's now time for us to invite you to fire some questions at us. I'm going to invite Olga to join us back in the room with myself and Jason to field your questions about any aspect of the project, its past, present and future developments. And I'd like to ask you to use the chat box for that, please, so that we can respond and choose a person who's best picked for that. Our colleague Islam John, who's from the International Relations Office at Namangan Engineering Construction Institute, has a first question. I think I'd like to direct this at Olga, if that's okay. And his question is, what are the possibilities for new participants to join the project or to benefit from the project outputs in the future?
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, participants, for the questions, and I think there will be a lot. As for the first question, yes, we know that there are a lot of universities who would like to join the team of EMI higher education institutions who are involved in the project. This year is the second year already of the project, and from the very beginning, initially actually, we were planning a 3-year project for EMI. We have now 16 universities involved in the project, and we are thinking about cascading, as Jason said, cascading the knowledge and skills that the teams have already gained within the project to be able to help other EMI teachers and higher education institutions to improve their teaching in English. As for another round of, let's say, enrollment of EMI higher education institutions, we're still thinking about this opportunity. We are in the process of planning, and if the decision is taken, of course, all universities will be informed about it through the Ministry of Higher and Secondary Specialized Education. We do know how important the role of foreign languages, and English in particular, is today in Uzbekistan, especially for higher education agenda. So as soon as we have some certain decision, of course, all of you will be informed about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. And I think regardless of that decision, there'll certainly be an aim, certainly from the Nile side, and I believe with the British Council side, to share some of the product output, some of the tools that have been developed wider beyond the project. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, of course, sure, sure. As Jason mentioned earlier today, within the project, we've developed a pack of resources, a pack of materials, training materials that are available now available for all these 16 universities, but will be available for other universities as well. Of course, this is something that the team was working about, and the team was preparing the materials just to not to keep it within the project, but to share with other universities, with other EMI teachers who will be, I guess, that the materials will be really very helpful and useful for them.
Great, thank you, Olga. There's another question here from Ozoda, who's coming from USWLU, the Uzbekistan State World Languages University, who's obviously the explicit focus of this university is the development of modern foreign languages across the Uzbek population. Jason, I know that they've been an active project participant at USWLU. Do you have any comment on specific next steps for elaboration and implementation of EMI in any of the project participants?
Well, I think one next step would be the cascading of training. I mean, I think it would be good to have maybe a discussion with Ozoda about that to find out what ideas are being discussed, you know, at the university there. Did you have something in mind there, Thom?
No, I think you're right. It's almost throwing the question back to you and your team, sort of where can you see this developing within your university? Because as well as the kind of the 16 university project participants, it's very much that we've focused on a small number of teachers and perhaps individual departments, individual faculties within those universities. So there's also an internal sharing need and empowerment of those people who've been on the project to extend the learning and extend the resources and extend the training to colleagues in other departments or colleagues within the department who haven't been active within the project itself. So I think that there is certainly an incentive and a responsibility among the project participants in individual universities to think about how they can share that learning more widely within their own department, within their own institution. So I think that would be the way to take that forward internally, and that's a conversation that British Council and Nile will be very happy to have with you on how we can support that internal development and next phases and implementation. And obviously one of the aims of a project like this is to make it sustainable, that this is not a one-off project with an end date, but that it gives you the tools and the confidence and the resources to take this further yourselves beyond the remit of the project itself.
Yeah, Thom, just to add to that, it would be great to see project participants, because I think in terms of sustainability, it's also about, you know, the idea of ownership, that the project participants really take ownership over this, and I hope they feel that they can do that. So it'd be great to see people starting to maybe write about their experience on the project. Perhaps we've been talking about some of the research that we've been doing in terms of baseline surveys and the monitoring and evaluation, but those are also things that can be done within a particular institution, and so you could start researching EMI within your own institution. That research could involve the idea of action research, where, you know, as an EMI practitioner, you're trying out something. For example, that action might be focusing on the collaboration between a subject teacher and the language teacher. You're trying something out, and then the research is about gathering evidence about the effectiveness of the action, and then evaluating that and thinking about what the implications might be for further actions. It'd be great to see project participants undertaking action research and reporting on that research, writing articles about their action research.
Absolutely, thank you. Nuraliev from Nile Institute of Entrepreneurship and Pedagogy. I think Olga's addressed that question about future participation in the project from other universities. We're coming up to the end of our allotted time for this. Jason, could I ask you just to talk about the next 2 webinars in the series?
Yeah, okay. So the next webinar, I'm going to be co-presenting that with my colleague Erkan Arkan, who's been involved in the project as well as a consultant. We're going to be focusing on more on the monitoring and evaluation aspect of what we've been doing, and actually looking at some of the evidence that we gathered about the impact. And we're going to be looking a little bit more at the tools that we've developed as part of the project. So that will be the next webinar on the 5th of March. Then on the 12th, Thom is going to be hosting a panel discussion. We're going to have 2 trainers that have been involved in the project. Russell Stannard, who's been delivering the training on flipped learning, and Winnet, who's done the training on assessment in EMI. We also hope that we can have some project participants as part of that panel as well, to talk about their own experience of the project, to get that perspective as well. So it's going to be a panel discussion. Of course, we're going to look at issues around assessment and around the idea of flipped learning as an approach to use for EMI, but hopefully we'll also have a discussion about, perhaps many other aspects of the project, I would hope.
Thank you, Jason. Some of the references here on some of the topics that Jason has included in what he's talked about today. Obviously, as part of this project, we've built up a very broad research literature around English medium instruction and its implementation around the world, which is another project output that we'll be aiming to share. So thank you very much to you all for your time. The recording of this will be available on British Council platforms, websites and social media, and we really hope that you'll be able to join us for the next 2 webinars in this particular series. To those of you who are from institutions represented in the project, thank you so much for your engagement, your participation, your enthusiasm and your professionalism throughout the project. And to those of you who are coming in and potentially future project participants or will use these resources in the future, very best of luck to you all with your English medium instruction for Uzbekistan higher education in the future. Thank you very much from us at Nile. Thank you, Olga, for joining us, and thank you all for being part of today's webinar.